Hello everybody. Today we're going to be painting snow bases. This is going to be for a Space Wolf project that I'm working right now, and we're going to be using Elrik Hobbies bases. You will see more about this in the description. Fair warning for everybody, this is going to be real-time painting. It's not going to be a recording and edition, so enjoy. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these bases. Elrik Hobbies makes these resin bases. Let me just give you a little bit of focus there. Sorry for all the changes. As you can see, these guys are extremely detailed and they are solid, so you can easily add magnets into the bases. I'll switch to manual to avoid all these changes. I'm sorry. This is going to be the last time I do that. Okay. So these bases in particular have something that is called Celtic knots, and you can find them in the Elrik bases as Celtic Ruins. These also have some Viking runes and some Celtic notes as decoration. The first step for this is going to be just priming. I did that off camera. I'm using this primer, which you are going to be also able to find it on Elrik site. You can go to elrikhobbies.com and you will find this. I will leave a discount code in the description so you can go for it. Okay. The first color I'm going to be using for the base is going to be Rhinox hide. Yeah, I normally move all my paints into dropper pots because it's easier for me just to handle into the wet palette. We're not going to be using a fancy brush. We're going to be just going straight and just slap the paint into it. I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible. This is going to be simulating what is going to be the wet earth under the ice. And this small piece of slab that is in here, we're also going to cover it. Not too much, because we're also going to dry brush it later. The more thin is the paint, the easier it's going to be running on the base. So remember to thin your paints. We need to try to go everywhere. I'm not using any sort of retardant. I'm just using the actual paint. Only thing with just water. The same for thinning the paint. To pass them into the bottles, I was just using a few drops of water just to thin it down. This is just to don't affect as much the properties of the paint. Some liquid retardants can actually affect the properties. Properties will be the viscosity and how well they can cover on top of the surfaces. And this is why we don't use a fancy brush, because we need to get the bristles inside everywhere. We're not going to go highly detailed in here, we don't need to. That's why we prime in brown color, so we don't have to be struggling with coverage after the paint. Okay, we're just going to leave it like that for a moment. Doesn't matter if it's not dry. We're going to start using another color, which is going to be Morphin brown. This is going to be a heavy dry brush. By heavy mean that we're not going to be taking as much away from the brush, so it's not going to be that dry, and we're just going to be using a thicker brush. I don't even think this brush has a brand. I just bought it from Michael's for a few dollars. And this, instead of going like the regular motion back and forth, we're going to stipple it. This is going to help us to blend the colors whenever we are reaching close to the other paint. Ignore that red, that wasn't my palette. We're also going to be covering the pillars. Let me talk to you a little bit about Elrik bases. They do many types of bases. This one in particular is one of the newest that I have. Personally, is one of my favorites, especially if you are doing sorry, I do words sometimes. If you are doing Space Wolves Army, this is just amazing, especially for the Celtic decorations that it has. They are really good quality, and if you have any magnetic trays or steel trays that you use to transport your miniatures, this is just amazing. So right now we don't care that it's not dry. This is going to help us to give a little bit of blend. I'm going to leave a little bit the camera so you can take an overall view on the entirety of the base. So right now doesn't really look that much, and that's the point where we want to reach right now. Now we're going to be drying our brush. We're going to be taking away most of the paint. Just use a towel. The pigment is already going to be in the base, so we can do this safely. We're just going to be we will continue stippling, and this is going to absorb the most of the paint without taking away the pigment. So yes, you can do this safely without taking the risk of removing the paint. And once we're done with this, yes, we are going to start now the dry brushing. We are not going to clean up the brush. We're just going to use it that way. And the first dry brush paint we're going to be using is going to be Sandry Dust. Which as well, I have in a dropper pot. Now we remove a really good amount, and the reason why I didn't want to remove the previous paint or wash the brush is because I want to leave a little bit of that brown into the mix so I can start blending those colors. I don't want this base to be extremely bright. So as you can see, it's already catching on all the top surfaces, all the right surfaces. and it's helping to blend with the previous colors that we were using. Because we want to make a difference between the colors that we were putting in the base. I'm going to leave this part alone for a few minutes, and I'm going to be focusing here. Now most of this is no longer Moonfarm brown, but now it's starting to catch up all the sandry dust. We don't really care right now for covering the top of the pillars or the stones, because these are going to be covered with snow. This is just going to be a slight dry brushing. Nothing fancy. No need for extremely fancy or high level techniques, because we also don't want this base to absorb the side or the view from the model we want to put on top. Let me just give you a little bit of preview on what is going to be on top of this one. So we're going to be having this in here. So we don't want this to be, the base to be brighter than the actual model that we want on top, because that is going to take the view away from the model. And the base should complement, should not be competing against the model that we are trying to base. Now this is a little bit drier, so we can just dry brush it. Go slow, build it. No need to have right now an extreme change. And into this slab, we are not going to dry brush it, we are actually going to stipple it. That is going to also help to give it a little bit of texture. Okay, that's it with this paint. Now we are going to go for a little bit of a screaming skull. Yes, I know this is not the next color, but because the base is not totally dry, we're going to be mixing this a little bit with the sandry dust we have on the base. So still without washing our brush, we're going to grab Screaming Skull, and this is not going to be a dry brush, this is going to be a stipple, so it's going to be leaving just little bits of paint, and this is what we want to achieve right now. We don't want it everywhere, we don't want this to be uniform, we want this to have a story, we want to have something uneven, because nature and damage is not even. So we don't want to have a perfect layer of color, we want to have the dabs here and there, just grabbing a little bit of color. If any of you have ever been in the snow, you will perfectly know that most of the ground is going to be covered with mud. Now the same without washing the brush. I just grab a little bit of white and I'm going to be mixing this one too, randomly, without focusing in any special detail or any special area, just here and there. Okay, so that's it on how we want to have it. Now we are going to go for the actual snow. So for the snow we're going to be using a technical, well, it's a gel. Now let me just wash my brush. Since we haven't washed the brush in a while, you need to rinse it really well because the paint may reach all the way to the furrow, and you don't want to do that if you don't want to ruin your brush. So that's why it's always recommended, if you're going to be this type of messy work, just do something with a brush that you don't care is going to be ruined. Just go for something cheaper. You don't need fancy brushes all the time. You keep your fancy brushes for your actual detail job. Okay, so the paint that we're going to be using is going to be this Liquitex White Opaque Flakes. This has no color. When it dries it's translucent, and it's going to have these multicolor flakes. So all this white is going to disappear. But even if you wet with paint, it's going to keep the paint and the shape. So we're just going to grab a little bit of here, and we are going to add randomly allocated, because snow is not going to be fall flat. Also going to go here. One of the most common mistakes that we do is trying to cover the whole scene with snow. And like I said at the beginning, if we are, or we know how a snow environment looks like, we will see mud, meaning that the snow is moving away every time that is movement. And playing 40k Warhammer 40,000, pretty much everybody is just running everywhere, battling here, killing someone there. Yeah, I think I'm going to be demonetized. Doesn't matter, I'm just doing this for fun. So the snow is going to be moving away. Okay. So now that is this way, we're also going to grab a brush that you don't really care too much for it. In this particular case, I'm going to be just grabbing an old Citadel wash brush that I have, and I'm going to be grabbing the white paint I have, and I'm going to be adding this on top. I don't want to cover the whole thing. It's going to be sitting on top, because I want a little bit of that icy effect that is going to be left once the paint is dry. Unfortunately, this type of gel takes several hours to paint, about 6 hours. So no, I'm not going to keep recording these 6 hours and let it paint, but I will take a few pictures after this video is done, and I will be posting those pictures in social media. I will add a few links for those pictures into the description, so you can take a look to the finished product. Now with our brush we're just going to be giving a little bit of movement to the actual snow, because snow is normally not spiky. Yeah, not everything has to have spiky bits. This is as much snow as we are going to be adding, and the reason for this is because the model is going to be occupying a really good amount of space here. I'm just going to hold it a little bit. So we also need some room for our model to sit. And yes, the best way to use these kind of bases is going to be just to add a little bit of pin, just a small pin, drill a hole, and just mount it into that hole, and that just a drop of super glue, and it's not going to move anywhere. And the last that we're going to be doing with this base is going to be adding the actual eyes. So this is going to be the first time I use it. I'm going to be using water texture, and for this one I just need to make a little bit of a hole on the top. I hope that is more than enough. Yep, that was more than enough. Okay, and we're just going to be adding this directly into the base wherever we want to have our eyes, and just by itself is just going to be running. If you have a bubble, you can just break it any moment. Once this dry, it's going to be totally shiny and translucent. And yeah, if it runs away, you can just grab a little bit of a paper towel and just clean it. Because I'm holding it in my hand, instead of having a flat surface, is going to be a little bit runny. I'm just going to move it to the board, to the table, and I'll do it here. Let me just focus. Sorry for all the movement. Okay, so now that we have it here, it's just going to be a matter of adding the eyes. And if you want to reach all the way to the edges, you can just grab your brush and carefully just move it. It will remain there. This also takes several hours to dry, so we're just going to leave it here overnight. And if for some reason during the night this gets outside of the edge, you can also just scrape it. It is resin, and just paint on top. I hope you guys liked it. This is going to be a very small and quick tutorial, but I want it to be as easy to follow as possible. Okay, I will stop moving the camera now. Thank you everybody for watching. My name is Leonid Lopez. I'm here from Blue Skull Studios. Have a good night or good day, whatever the time it is, wherever you guys are watching. Thank you for watching.